I bought a used S54 from Facebook Marketplace, and it was supposed to have the Vanos rebuilt and the rod bearings done and be a good, well, nicely running engine. Well, it turns out that's not the case. This engine is kind of a giant piece of crap. So in this video, I'm going to dive into this thing and show you all the problems with it, some unexpected surprises like a broken tensioner. It's really not what I expected, but I'm going to rebuild it anyway and get it into that E30 M3. And I do want to iterate that it's not the guy's fault that I bought it off of on Marketplace. He said he was told by the guy he got it from that these parts were redone and even produced receipts. But I'll show you in a little bit that, well, none of that work was done.
So while this S54 isn't in good shape, I am going to take it from looking like this
to this. Over here is the engine for my E30 M3. It's an S54 out of an E46 M3, and I need to get it in this car, but there's a whole lot of work I have to do first. Number one, this is half torn apart and needs at least a partial rebuild. Number two, this engine bay needs repainted because whoever did it did a terrible job. They painted over the wiring, they painted over all the brake lines, and I just want to make this look, well, a lot nicer. Number three, my engine stand is currently occupied by a built S52, so I've got to figure out how to get this engine somewhere else and off this stand and get the S54 on this stand, then we can start tearing into that today.
If you guys missed the last episode, this thing has a brand new suspension on it, front to back, all around, and it's ready to roll, but it needs an engine first, so let's get that engine in there, and before that, I have to rebuild it, or at least part of it.
It's also going to be nice getting this engine out of the way because I can't even clean or really work on anything over here. It's blocking my shelf. It's got a bit of pain since I got it, and it's really messy too.
First up is getting the S52 off the engine stand, which will be easier said than done. I recently did a cut ring head gasket on this. It's a built engine. It's got rods, it's got pistons. It's basically good for a high level of boost, probably around 1,000 horsepower, and it's going to go on my white E30, well, someday, if I don't sell it.
Before I move this, I do want to at least somewhat bolt down this valve cover. That way I don't lose it. Everything still looking good in here? Yeah.
I know I could get another engine stand, but the problem is space. I can't fit two engines on two engine stands in this small garage.
So what I think I'm going to do is put this in the trailer, maybe put it in storage somewhere, because I do still want to build the white E30, but I just simply don't have time with all the other projects going on, and I don't want to do two E30s at the same time. I don't think that'd be very smart for YouTube. First, I do need these motor mount arms for the S54.
And as expected, this thing still turns over like butter, nice, smoothly, and easily. And I squirted some WD-40 into the valves and into the combustion chambers just to help prevent it from any kind of corrosion if it's going to be sitting for a bit.
Obviously, I'm going to need the cherry picker to get that off the engine stand and into the trailer.
And all the rebuild parts I mentioned earlier in the video, well, here they are. Man, there's a lot. And here are the parts. Got the usual suspects, all new gaskets and whatnot, but I also got ARP rod bolts, new rod bearings, new coils from Turner, new pulleys, etc. You'll see it all in just a little bit.
Right.
But before I can start working on the S54, I've got to get this S52 in the trailer, which is going to be easier said than done. My driveway is not flat, the trailer is not in a good spot, and I can't move the trailer because my truck is currently in the shop getting worked on.
I also have nice lighting.
Oh, because we couldn't have got it in here without
No?
that. Nope, didn't think about that.
Oh, that's not bad. Oh my goodness, look at that. Have to get it off the stand.
We struggled to get the engine in the trailer. No way I could have done that alone, but thankfully it made it in there safely. Now it's time to get it off the engine stand and then get the engine stand and the engine hoist back in the garage and kind of do the same thing with the S54.
Oh, you're tripping. That's crazy over here.
Damage.
While I did drain this engine before I put it in here, a whole lot more oil came out, and I didn't want to stain the brand new floor that I just painted on the trailer. Luckily it cleaned up pretty easily, and I hope no more leaks out while it's sitting there. What's pretty neat is the S52 and S54 engine blocks are so similar, I didn't have to adjust my engine stand mount at all, and I could reuse the old bolt, so that made this process at least a little bit easier.
There you go. Nope. Nice.
As expected, this engine is pretty crusty, pretty filthy, pretty dirty, and oil stained, and of course, I'm going to take care of all that. There's no way I'm rebuilding, resealing, regasketing this engine without making it look as good as possible. I know a lot of people have a sore spot when it comes to injecting your engine with water, but trust me, it'll be just fine. I'm avoiding all the parts that should be avoided, and I'm blow drying it at the end, so it's not like this water is going to sit there and cause corrosion and other problems. And there's no other way to clean this engine being as filthy as it was. I got most of the pulleys and stuff removed from the front end, so the first thing up is a new water pump and thermostat.
Yeah, you were just talking about fluid on the floor.
Yeah. When would there be fluid on the floor?
Oh, you f***ing bitch.
Well, broke it again. See if the JB weld is holding. All right, we're back. The features and everything with this camera are absolutely fantastic, but man, it's just not built for a shop environment like this, that's for sure. I'm hoping maybe DJI makes an updated one at some point that's, well, a little tougher.
Time to get back to work on this thing. Somebody must have recently had this intake manifold off because these bolts are completely loose. Well, it's a little worrisome. None of these have clamps on the other side. I think that's pretty much everything off the front, so now it's time to flip this thing over and take a look underneath and check out these rod bearings.
There are many reasons to replace the rod bearings in your engine. Now, typically on most engines, this is something you only have to replace if there's a major failure. However, in the case of BMW engines, specifically the S54 and S55 engines, they have common rod bearing failures. and they actually suggest replacing them around 75,000 miles. And that's every 75,000 miles, which is kind of crazy. So by replacing them now, not only is it going to be a lot easier than in the car, it's just necessary.
Oh, headers are in the way. I'm like, why can't the engine spin further? And that's why. So I'm almost thinking, should I just take the headers off now? That just makes me want to pressure wash this all over again. One thing I read about was this O-ring leaking, and my engine is pretty wet right there, so I'm guessing that probably was leaking. I'm guessing that's impossible to do with the engine in the car. So I'm going to replace that now. You see, the old one was super hard and brittle, and it just completely cracked in half. So I got a nice new one on there. Hopefully that'll stop any future leaks. Now it should turn over.
Obviously, I know I could have flipped the engine the other way around, but I needed the headers off anyway because I'm either going to upgrade them or maybe do some modifications to them.
Next up comes the oil pump, because I believe I have to change some of these pieces for the new oil pan.
And the new oil pan is front sump mounted because, well, that's all that fits in E30s.
All right, it's that time. Let's pull the first rod bearing.
I wasn't looking forward to doing these rod bearings, but with the engine out of the car, it's going to make it relatively easy. If you guys remember the last time I did rod bearings, well, it was an S54, which has more pistons.
Oh no. Part of the rod? Is it journal? Oh boy, oh boy.
And the engine was still in the car, which made it a huge pain in the rear.
Lot better.
And I didn't have any experience doing it. So this time, it's going to be easier. Plus, I'm going to use something I've never used before, a plastic gauge. And hopefully I get this job done correctly and nothing goes wrong. Though I still think the S55 was doomed, whether I did the rod bearings or not.
Ah, of course I dropped the bolt. Now that could have been catastrophic. Come here, little buddy. Oh boy. Man, when you guys are right, you guys are right. I was just gonna run it, and now I'm certainly glad that I did. I mean, there's no gouges or anything, but these look like they have some wear on them.
Now, when I bought this engine, I was told that the rod bearings and vanos had both been completed, but now I'm really starting to doubt that. And luckily for me, I bought rod bearings anyway. The installation process is pretty straightforward. Just got to make sure everything is clean, push the piston up a little bit so you can get the old rod bearing out, slip the new one in, put the other rod bearing on the other side of the cap, lay down the extremely small and thin plastic gauge, torque everything to spec dry with no lube, take it all back apart and see what the plastic gauge reads. And if it's good, then you put it all back together just like you did, but with some engine assembly lube.
Okay, that's 70 foot-pounds. Now I take it back apart, see what the plastic gauge says. Hey, all right, plastic gauge is there. Okay, we are right at, I mean, we're almost right on the money. It's the two checkers are 0.038 and 0.051, and it seems to be about right in the middle of those, which is right within spec. Awesome. It's gonna be hard for you guys to see it there. Right there. Now we'll put some actual assembly lube on it. One down, 5 to go.
I was very happy with how the first one went. And if you look at the old bearings, they certainly weren't replaced like they were supposed to have been. But now that I got the technique down, the last 5 definitely went a good bit quicker. And I'll have a link to these rod bearings down below along with everything else used in this video. I got this stuff from Turner and they provide excellent instructions for you DIYers. If you guys didn't know, this was an early S54, so it had the old style bolts. Technically, I could reuse these bolts per BMW. But if I'm going to upgrade everything else, why not upgrade to ARPs? That way I know they're not stretched, I know they will work. But that also goes to show you that these rod bearings have not been replaced. They are WPC treated rod bearings, and it's a full set upper and lower. They're supposed to be stronger and smoother with less friction. And one last clearance check on the last cylinder, cylinders 1 and 6, and they checked out just like all the rest.
Yeah, all these seem to be pretty much absolutely perfect.
So with some lube and some torquing, this job is done. Well, the rod bearing job at least. There's still a lot more to do.
That is rod bearing job done.
And the engine seemed to turn over without issue, except for the fact that I left the spark plugs in it, so it definitely has some good compression.
Cool. Now that does leave a problem. This chain tensioner is broken, and I did not break it. So I got to figure out if and how I can even replace that thing without pulling the head. I sure hope I can. I may just have to, yep, I'm going to have to pull the timing cover. That's annoying. Very, very annoying. And here are all the old bearings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, I really don't think they've ever been changed. Number one, these are the old style rod bolts, which you technically can reuse, but I'd imagine if someone was going to do this job, they would probably replace them with ARPs like I did. And because, I mean, look at that. That one's pretty worn down, cylinder 3. Cylinder 3 is definitely the worst. That one looks like it's down in the copper, so that's certainly not ideal. I'm glad, though, that you guys talked me into replacing these because I was just going to run it because I didn't want to mess with this because of my experience with S55s. But now, I'm glad I did it. It's certainly way easier outside of the car with the engine on the stand. Now, if you guys are looking for any Black Friday deals, I've got an extraordinary deal for you if you want some wireless earbuds. And these are the everyday earbuds from Raycon. Not only are these really affordable, but they have active noise cancellation and a 32-hour battery life. Not only that, they're weatherproof and sweat resistant, plus in just 10 minutes of charging, you can get 90 minutes of playtime. Earbuds are something I always use when I go to the gym because I don't want to listen to old men grunting, so it's nice to have these so I can listen to music and not be disturbed. Oh yeah, big pump. And they even make protective cases, which I have on here. It's time to say big for Black Friday, so go to buyraycon.com/Matt Ross to get up to 30% off site-wide. That's right, you get up to 30% off everything on Raycon's website when you go to buyraycon.com/Matt Ross. So I think next up is getting this nasty AC compressor off here and pulling the timing cover. Well, I wasn't thinking at all. I actually need the oil pump from my S52, and that's in the trailer, and the oil pan's still on it, so now I gotta take the hoist back out there. The whole freaking wheel came off. Jack it back up, take the oil pan off of that. One of those days, one of those projects, really. Get the oil pump off to put on here with the sprocket from this, and the pickup from an E34 M50 with the E34 M50 oil pan. A whole lot of jibber jabber. Then I also gotta get this off of here, and this and that, and it's just turning into a lot more work than I initially anticipated, but that's okay. Everything's fine. By the way, still super pumped with how this trailer turned out. I love absolutely everything about it. If you haven't checked out any of the videos, please do. I think it's worth your while. Pretty soon, doing some custom cabinets up here, and I'm also gonna do some type of tool chest and a winch. The solar has been working absolutely phenomenally. I left the lights on numerous occasions, completely drained the battery. Then the next day, battery's charged back up. And it's just a wee little battery too. But you can see here, I actually have access to every single bolt, I believe, going around here. So I don't think I need to hoist this up after all. Oh, yep. Sprocket is tack welded on, so I'll have to deal with that after I get the pump off, but it's not the end of the world. I think this is an upgraded pump too, if I remember correctly. Here you can see the aftermarket rods in this engine. This is a really nicely built engine. I believe it has eel rods, but I mean, this thing is so fresh and so clean. I mean, I remember I even had the baffle welded into the oil pan with the little flaps. I had the whole oil pan powder coated. It's got welded in bungs for turbo fittings. Like, this was a sweet build. It just, a turbo in an E36 just isn't a good idea, in my humble opinion. Ha. There we go. That's a freaking pain. I didn't think I was going to be able to get that one. There's still a lot of gunk in there, so at least I look on the bright side, can make this engine just that much cleaner, and I'll replace this seal as well. There we go. Except I lost half my bolts. Whoops. I'm gonna have to look this up on real OEM. This is the oil pump tensioner, which is broken, but I don't see any kind of spring. I would think a spring would go up here. Maybe that's why it's broken. Looks like I'm gonna have to order that too. Unless that's what this is? Because I don't know where this came from. I also need to get this clip off of here without shooting it across the garage and losing it. Which, oh, okay, I got it, cool. There's that broken hunk of junk. I think I'm definitely going to take this outside and clean it again, because I got the block almost bare now compared to what it was. And of course, the other very crucial part to this build is, well, the correct oil pan.
I've taken this engine apart way further than I was initially planning. Actually, when I got the engine, I was pretty much just going to slap it in the car, but we've gone fully down the rabbit hole yet, and we're not even done. There's still some more things that need to be removed.
I gotta get this motor mount arm off here, which has a bunch of crap in the way. Man, I'm really going down the rabbit hole, which I was not planning on doing. I just wanted to get this in the car, but whatever, it happens, and it'll be a better car in the end anyway. Look out. Starter's not doing anyone any favors either. And this thing kind of looks like crap. I'll probably replace this too.
While I'm not quite ready to bolt on the oil pan, next up is the oil pump, and that needs some modifications first as well. But before that, I wanted to get the block cleaned and ready to go, and a roll-off disc makes quick work of that.
Very hard to tell, even on person, let alone camera, but these oil pump sprockets are a different offset, so I do have to swap them. This one's tack welded on, not a big deal. I should be able to cut that pretty easily. When I flippy-floppy them, I'll tack weld the new one on as well. First thing I have to do is remove this old one. You know, I remember reading that you shouldn't use brake cleaner on any parts you're about to weld, so don't do what I just did there. In fact, I'm gonna let the garage air out. I'm gonna let that part air out for a while before I weld it. Apparently it creates some kind of gas that can just instantly kill you. So that will sit like that. Gets bolted to that. This will sit on there. I don't know if someone did this with this before. It's like they bashed something and they patched it and they painted it. It's not great, but it'll work.
I kept going further and further down the rabbit hole to the point I decided I have to take care of this block. Paint is chipping, the rust is chipping, it just looks awful, so I had to strip a whole bunch more stuff off of it, but I am going to clean it again, and I am going to give it a fresh coat of paint because it deserves it and it needs it.
At this point, things have 100% spiraled out of control. This thing is almost down to a bare block, which was not my intent at all, but just seeing how rough a condition this engine is, I think it's worth it in the end. The only question is, will I be able to get it back together? But even so, next up, I gotta clean this and repaint it. Wasn't on the books, wasn't on the schedule at all, but I'm doing it. Slap this on here temporarily just to keep some contaminants. Contaminants? You know what I mean. Ooh, whoops. Let's get that off there.
So after a ton of scraping, pressure washing, leaf blowing, and pressure gunning, this is what I've got. Much, much better already. Super happy with that result. I got pretty much all of those chunky, rusty bits of metal off there, so I just gotta tape it up and paint it, and then reassemble the entire thing.
If you guys are liking this content, it would mean a lot to me if you would like, comment, and subscribe. Really helps out.
And after all that extra work, I think it was worth it. What do you guys think?
This looks way better. Is it perfect? No, but if you guys didn't know, I'm not building a show car here. I'm just building a nice daily driver with a nice engine that's not all rusted and disgusting and with a broken oil pump tensioner and clapped out rod bearings. I'm very happy with how this came out. This looks way better. I wasn't planning on doing any of this, but now I'm glad I did. Now it's time to assemble everything. I already forget a lot of the stuff. This is where the majority of things go that I'll forget. I remember taking a long tube off was one of the last things I did, so maybe it was this. Oh man, I'm already lost. think these threads have ever had any bolts in them, so they're gonna need a good tapping, I believe. I think they're kind of just filled with rust.
The reason I have to use these new bolt holes is because I have to use E36 engine mount arms to make it fit in the E30. Now it's time to seal up the valve cover with all new gaskets, and first I have to clean everything. And I know you guys are going to mention it, why aren't I doing a valve adjustment? Why aren't I rebuilding the Vanos? Well, that's probably going to come at a later point, definitely going to come at a later point, but for now I just want to get this engine together. After all, I had the majority of it apart. I want to keep the mistakes to a minimum. With the valve cover sealed and torqued, it's time for new spark plugs and new coil packs. So enjoy the ASMR.
Thankfully, those all look pretty normal.
It's starting to look like an engine again, which is surprising because I had this thing completely torn down, other than the head still being on the block. But now it's time to get some new spark plugs and coil packs in there from Turner, but there's something I have to do first.
Now, you know what I got to do before putting new plugs in there? Seen every inch of this engine except for, well, the pistons. Let's hope everything is good and I didn't just waste my time. And you're right, I probably should have done this first. Boy, that camera can really barely fit in there, but from what I can see, piston number 1 looks perfect. Yeah, it's a tight fit. Number 2 also looks great. From what I can see, 3 looks good. 4 is going to be the same view. 4 good. 5 is good. Now, there's some crap on the cylinder walls, and that's because I just pressure washed it, so don't mind that. I'm going to squirt some WD-40 in there. And number 6. Okay, there I can see cross-hatching. You got some fluid on there. Yeah, everything, whew. All right, guys, everything looks good, thankfully, so I'll feel better. All that's really gonna do is make more of a mess on the floor. But now I wanna spin the engine over and see how it spins without spark plugs to make sure it still is smooth, because with compression, it was a little hard to turn it. Oh yeah. The fact that I'm spinning this by hand, I think, tells you all you need to know. That's awesome. That makes me feel better. Number 1 going in. Now here, I'm a little clueless, guys, as to what I do with this line, since my oil pan doesn't have that little drain thing in it now.
If you're curious why I'm removing these old exhaust studs, which is super fun by the way, it's because I have new manifolds coming, and also because I have new studs coming.
Just for now, and so I get this thing out of my way, put the beauty cover on. I do wish this would have cleaned up a little nicer, but it really is what it is. I'm not going to sandblast it because, well, because I don't have a sandblaster. But I do have a new front main seal. All right, I'll try a little scrubbing by hand. it's a little cleaner. As long as it's sealed, that's what I really care about, and that it's not completely covered in gunk everywhere, because it certainly was before.
Now we are a lot of trash and just a few parts away from having this engine completely back together and ready to drop in the car.
Okay, let's get that installed. Before I install the tensioner, I want to get all the surface areas as clean as possible before installing the timing cover, because obviously I still have the old head gasket here, so I need to get that as clean as possible and put some RTV on that. Make sure all this is perfect. I want 0 leaks. Probably still gonna have some leaks, but I want 0. That's more like it. I'm just going to do a tiny bit on the block surface as well. Not necessary, but like it may help. This is an older engine. I'm certain nothing is quite as flat as it used to be. I gotta get it over the crank seal. There's a lot I gotta do at once. Now it's very important that while I got the other bolts started, I want to tighten these 2 top ones first. That way it draws it up and creates a nice seal on the head gasket before I tighten everything and draw it inward.
Everything was going smoothly and torquing nicely until I got to the last bolt, which, of course, snapped in half.
Well, by golly, I think I saved it. Oh, heck yeah. I'm super impressed with myself. That'll do.
Now I could finally put all the front accessories back together, including the oil filter housing, the water pump, the new thermostat, the thermostat housing, the Vanos actuators, all the wiring and clips, and of course all the accessories like the water pump, power steering pump, the alternator, etc., which also included a power pulley set from Turner Motorsports.
there really is only one thing left to finish up this engine build. Well, at least for now.
The quality and condition of the stock exhaust manifolds and cats are really unknown, so I figured why not replace it. So I got a set of exhaust manifolds from Megan Racing, and at the very worst, they'll at least look nicer.
Now, I don't have my new studs and nuts yet. That's why I'm just using this random Allen bolt that I found. Of course, that would happen. That is a semi-complete, mostly put together S54. I'm really proud of how this thing came together. Let me know what you guys think of the longer video style. Huge thanks to Turner and ECS Tuning for supplying a lot of the parts for this build, and I'll have links to everything down below.